I like the remix.
I love it. I love it. Oh my God. I remember last time we did that. Coriander was like, I thought something was wrong. It's like, no, man, it's the part of the rap where he says spiral. uh,
Oh
Thanks a lot,
shoot.
man. We appreciate that, Strange Monkey. You're all right. Miss C saying, I'm not a fan. I think Rock needs to stick with comedy. Oh,
Hmm.
interesting. Okay. All right.
See, I liked him
Um,
more in a serious role than his comedy,
I think so too, man. It
but
was
that's just
something
my opinion.
fresh. It was something fresh. This it definitely wasn't a downside to the movie, I don't think. But let's talk about this kill. Let's start this thing off. Let's talk about some opening thoughts on this movie, like when it started. If you remember when you first saw the movie, what were the vibes that you were getting from it?
Well, when it comes to the Saw movies, I always just wonder, okay, where are we going with this?
Mm,
How is it going? Now we did have a few where we knew who the antagonist was. It was the
right.
Hoffman or,
That's
so
right.
forth. But this one and its predecessor, the last one
Hmm.
before this, you didn't know who the killer was.
Right.
And I kind of like that because it adds another layer of the mystery.
Hmm.
Um, and a lot like the last movie where we followed two of the detectives and also the forensic side of it. Here we're following a, a police, precinct straight up, and
Hmm.
the detectives in it and so forth. And for
Yeah.
me, I'm kind of like Coriander, where my favorite Chris Rock is just stand-up comedian Chris Rock, not necessarily actor Chris Rock,
Hmm.
but I was very interested to see what he was going to do with this because obviously he's a fan of Saw. He executive produced this, and he helped get this made. Um, so for me, I just was really interested to see what direction we're going to go. And
Yeah.
for the most part, at least on my first impression, they did not disappoint.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's one thing that I wanted to jump into, and I wanted to kind of go through some of the things where I think, obviously, we've already said this that we're fans of this movie, and anyone that saw our previous episode knows that too. But I wanted to talk about why I think, and I think the first thing, and I'll start with you, Coriander, on this. I think the first thing we got to talk about is Chris Rock, and
Yeah.
what he brought to this role. And we've seen, and I'll get to you in a second, Brandon, but we've seen a lot of comedians that have gone into very serious movies, serious work, whether it's
Mm.
Tom Hanks, Robin Williams, Jordan Peele, or so forth and so forth. And it's amazing to see them do so well in the other genres because I
Yeah.
mean it's been proven that it can be done.
See,
So what did go
it's
ahead, Coriander?
interesting
What do
that
you
you
think?
said, compared, all these other comedians because when they're doing comedy, they bring like different style. You know what I mean? It just seems like with Chris Rock, it's always like yelling and fuck it, you know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
he just really never did anything for me.
Mm-hmm.
But him in this role, I mean, if he did more serious roles, I would probably enjoy his acting more, in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion.
Yeah,
But I thought he was great. You know, he had so many ranges of emotions in this movie,
he did.
and
Yeah, and that's
he his
yeah.
yeah, his acting was excellent. I thought he was really good in this. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. Ginger Ninja was also saying, which I was pleasantly surprised with how good he was. Um,
Yeah.
Speaking about Chris Rock, I agree. I was pleasantly
Hmm.
surprised too. My good friend Neil in the chat saying, I got to see Chris Rock in a small comedy club that only holds a few hundred people when he was polishing his material for Bigger and Blacker. He was great. Yeah, I think as a comedian, a stand-up comedian, he's gold. But I agree with you, Kill. I was never like a huge fan of his as far as like in movies because, and I think part of that too is you kind of get a little typecast. We've seen that happen with dozens and dozens of other actors and actresses. But Kill, what did you think about Chris Rock in this role and how he portrayed this character of Zeke?
I liked it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And because, well, for one, it's interesting, and I'll quantify exactly what I mean by this. This entry of Saw probably has the biggest names that any of the Saw movies have had. Now, the way I want to quantify that is biggest names outside of the horror spectrum.
Right.
Samuel L. Jackson, Chris Rock, no disrespect to Tobin and the great actors that have been in this franchise. But these two names, you've never really tied them, with horror. 1406 with Samuel, but for the most part, they do action movies, comedy, dramas, etc. Chris Rock coming in here with Samuel L. Jackson being his father in here, he brought something that was very fresh, in my opinion, to the Saw franchise. He had comedy, but sort of like what you just said. But he had so much other range going on because his character is kind of that stereotypical cop. Like, hey, Thompson, in my office right now, and I don't play by the rules,
Right.
And I don't want a partner. We've seen that.
Yes,
we've seen
good
that
point.
whether it was Lethal Weapon, Tango and Cash, you name it. But I think the thing that really adds a different dynamic to this is not only a jigsaw killer, but also the fact that Chris Rock doesn't trust anyone around him on the force. So there really is a reason for him not wanting a partner, because he has actual hardcore trauma with these people that he works with.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that was an interesting aspect of it. And let me just get to the chat, and then I want to bring up something and then pass it on to you, Coriander. We've got Bluckus in the chat. What's going on?
Hey.
And Neil saying, I liked Spiral. It stands out as quite different as a Saw film, but I don't think it was a bad direction to go in. Okay.
Yeah.
Russell saying, I agree, Coriander. He needs more serious roles. And let's see. Kale saying, I liked Spiral a lot. It's one of my favorites in the franchise. Spiral has a great concept and the best comedy in the franchise as well. And a lot of it came from Jackson. You want to play games, motherfucker? Yeah. Nobody's in the chat. What's going on? Saying Spiral sucks as a Saw movie. Be a lot better if it was a standalone whodunit movie. Well, and that's one thing I wanted to actually go into. That's interesting you say that, because here's the thing. We've watched every single movie in this franchise. Now, first of all, just to give some background, because some of you guys I know are newer to the live chat, I've watched every single one of these movies in the theater. I've been a fan since they've all come out. Same thing with you, Kill. Coriander is a little bit newer to the franchise, going through the movies twice now. But to me, at this point, this is the 9th movie in the franchise. So the question is, and this is what I want to bring up, is the freshness. I think that this is actually an advantage this movie has, because we've seen it this franchise do so many things, go forwards in times, sideways, backwards, and obviously everything revolving around John Kramer. Now, I love John Kramer as a character. I absolutely love Tobin Bell, but the question is, first of all, in the franchise, he's dead. So, they made that mistake a long time ago. So how many times can you keep bridging back to him? And so the question is, do you want to try to keep doing what you've been doing, kind of like what they did in Jigsaw, or do you want to do something new? And this was where they went to the new direction. I personally liked that. They were able to go into a new direction, but still have threads to, Jigsaw, the killer, and, the past movies. And I think it was probably, to me, the best thing they could have done, because, we just talked about Jigsaw the other week. I liked that movie.
Yeah.
But I like this movie better. And that the biggest reason
you gotta
is
remember,
because it is
right?
fresher.
Yeah, this movie's called Spiral. So the whole point of, is the focus on the, what I mean, what the spiral represents. And so I like that. Yeah, they totally went in a new way. Definitely.
Yeah. Because again, as a Saw film, there's only so much you can do. Now, I say this with the knowledge, and we all know this, that next October, they are going to do Saw 10, and they are going to have Tobin Bell back. We don't know exactly how all that's going to work. My thought of it is it's going to take place in between one of the earlier movies, which I'm okay with, especially if Tobin Bell is a key player in that movie. You know what I'm saying? Because we haven't had that really since 2 and 3. So, in other words, I guess what I'm saying, so people don't think I'm contradicting myself, is if Tobin Bell is a key player and it takes place in between some of the earlier movies, like in between 1 and 2 or something like that, that's still going to be fresh because we haven't seen that in years. You know what I mean? But for this movie, being that it's moving forward in time, I think it was really the only choice they had is to do something different and kind of have some distance from the other movies. What do you think about that, Kill, as far as the freshness of this movie? Do you think that that was an advantage it had or a disadvantage?
Yeah, I definitely think it was an advantage. Because how many times can you keep kind of going back to that same well of,
Hmm.
oh, I was an apprentice to John, and oh, I secretly worked
Right,
with John, and oh, I was his first student, or I was this his exchange student, and it's just like, okay,
right,
come on, you know,
right.
John had a damn army. You know, I was his Home Depot supplier to get him his materials. You know, I brought him his groceries. You know, he had cancer. I helped that way. You know, come on, guys. You know, um, and essentially in this movie, and I'm not trying to spoil anything, but
Mhm,
it was fresh that they went into a different avenue as far as the killer in this movie, and
mhm,
the reasonings why the killer did, what he or she did. And that's
mhm,
one complaint that I've had, and I've made jokes about it in the past of
mhm.
John got mad at that guy because he took his parking space at his
Right,
apartment complex. The
right.
the jigsaw killer in this definitely has reasons for
Yes,
for
and
for
okay,
Yes.
and so
targeting every person that he or she targeted.
Mm-hmm.
And I
okay, and so
mean,
that
yeah.
okay, so that goes to the next thing I was going to get to in a little bit, but motive. Um, so you just answered that, but Coriander, what about you? What did you think of the motive for the movie as far as for the Spiral Killer?
Ah, you know, mm, I guess you said that we could talk spoilers, right? So
Yes.
if I witnessed my father being murdered by a cop, holy shit. I mean, that right there, yeah, it's a perfect motive if you ask me. So yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think for me too. I think that again, it was something that really it worked with the story because you had Chris Rock portraying a cop that was thought of as a rat. He was disliked by everyone in the precinct except for his captain, and there was a lot of stress and tension around that, and also the fact that they're dealing with a new killer that's a jigsaw copycat, and how does he deal with that, and also the strained relationship with his father, who's thought of as this big hero of the precinct and the police force and so forth. So this is what I'm saying, guys. There were a lot of things going on in this story that I think was a really great direction because I was really invested. With all these movies, we've talked about this in all of our other reviews to some degree, but the mystery surrounding the killer and the detective work, or even if they're crooked cops, is usually a high point in the movie, especially in the first movie. To me, what Spiral did so well is it took some of the elements of that first movie, the detective aspect, and it went back to basics. You know what I'm saying? And I think that that was a really smart movement because as the movies went on and on, the traps got more elaborate, they were bigger, they were more horrendous. And you're thinking, how did John, even if it was John and Hoffman and Dr. Gordon or whoever the hell it was, how did they have all these traps? Because they kept getting more elaborate. So with Spiral, the thing that was interesting to me is that it really took it back to the basics and it had patience. This is another reason why I think it's a lot better than what people give it credit for. Because it's interesting because as the Saw movies went on, even though the traps were like the big thing, a lot of people started to get desensitized to them because they just became bigger and more grandiose and so forth. What do you think about that, Kill, as far as the patience and kind of they really stripped this movie down back to basics in a way, to me, anyways?
Yeah, I kind of don't want to use the word they simplified things, but things are less grandiose.
Right.
And they're very personal. and you can feel that with the way the killer puts his captives in these particular traps. You know, like, oh, you're a rat. Well, this trap is gonna rip out your tongue, or you know, it just things of that nature, and it really feels personal, which
Yes.
it is. It's very personal, and you know, the one thing, especially rewatching all these movies in a short period of time, like we've done, is in the middle of that pack of movies, in the middle of the franchise, some of the movies blur together a little bit. Some of the traps blur together a little bit. And a lot of them had me kind of scratching my head. How did they build this? How did they get the metal for this? How did no one at the steel mill or Home Depot ask questions? How did this man, who unfortunately was suffering from cancer, build this? And of course, some of that's answered. He had help, etc., etc. But in here, I love the Saw movies where you don't actually know who the killer is.
Right. Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of watching a Scream movie. It's like, oh, who's the killer this time? And it's just part of the fun.
Right. Now, just to get to the chat real quick before I get to you, Coriander, Blanca was saying that he didn't like the voice that they used in Spiral. What did you think of it, Coriander?
I mean, it was okay, but it didn't like ruin the movie for me or anything.
Okay. How about you, Kel?
Yeah, I gotta agree with Blanca. I didn't really like the voice. It was, hello, detective. You would like to talk about snitching.
Yeah.
And it was just like, okay.
It was an odd choice.
Yes, it was an odd choice, but it didn't ruin it for me, I guess.
Well, it didn't ruin it for me either, but let me just say this. Tobin's voice is just so iconic, and obviously Costas Mandylor, he has a very deep voice as well. So I get what they might have been aiming for, as far as we can't have another voice that's kind of deep like that, so let's do something on the other side of it. Anytime you're talking about sequels, you're always going to run down these roads of, man, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. If you do a voice that's kind of similar to the other ones, it's the same old thing. But if you do something different, it may not work because people are used to the other style. But I wasn't a big fan of the voice either. It was just kind of, I don't know, odd is the word I use for it for me. But yeah. Dominic saying Spiral is an underrated gem. All right.
Yeah.
Ninja saying it was a different direction, which was a great fresh look at the Saw franchise. I do agree with that. I do agree with that. Robert's in the chat too. What's going on? Strange Monkey saying I would have been okay with Spiral coming out after Saw 3D. Jigsaw was fun, but they kept adding more to John's backstory, which was unnecessary. I agree with that. Yeah, and I enjoyed Jigsaw, but if I compare the two, and of course we are planning to rank the franchise, which should be a monumental. It's gonna be crazy, man. It's 9 movies, but I will say right now, I did enjoy this movie more than Jigsaw, because I think, number one, like what we've been talking about, it had a fresh take. It did a better job of doing a quote unquote Jigsaw copycat killer to me. You know what I mean? And yeah, absolutely. Bobby's in the chat saying I'll have to rewatch it. Maybe my instincts said no, and I went against it to give it a try, and couldn't get over how bad Chris Rock was. It was like Mary J in season 1 of Umbrella Academy. Just no. Really? I really thought Chris Rock was good in this. I really did.
I did too.
I'm not saying that he was like, the greatest actor of all time, but for what they were doing in the movie, like he's playing a cop, a street cop, or detective, I should say, that is very streetwise. So it's funny, and I'm not trying to belittle him either, but tell me what you think, Kill, and then we'll go to Coriander. But it almost, his style worked for the story, in my opinion, because the one thing I did also enjoy in this movie, and then I'll get it to you, Kill, is the fact that in this movie, they had some really cool world building. You know what I'm saying? Like the city felt real, it felt organic, but it didn't feel as polished, especially compared to 3D or Jigsaw. What did you think about that, Kill? Because I think Chris Rock, I think his style fit into this character he was portraying, and it helped to make the world real, you know?
It did, but I guess the only critique I would say is towards the beginning of the movie. It
Hmm.
kind of sounded like he was trying to do a lot of stand-up comedy.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, yeah, he
Um,
definitely had some of that. Yep.
and and as the movie progressed more and got more serious with stuff that
Hmm.
was going on, that stopped, and I appreciated that stopped. Other than that, I agree with you. I mean, he's a cop. He's a young cop. He's the son of a hero cop. He's an
Mm.
African American cop in this precinct where they think he's a snitch because he did the right thing once,
Right. Hmm.
and now he kind of walks, and he literally says he with a target on his back. He doesn't know
Yeah.
who he can trust, and on
Hmm.
top of that, unfortunately, when you do things right like that, when you're out in these streets and you're trying to police a neighborhood or something like that, you don't know if you're going to get backup
Yeah.
because people
Right.
don't, your fellow cops may not trust you or want
Hmm.
you to survive. So I didn't have an issue with Chris Rock, and I truly think for people who did not like this movie, that's what it all hinges on. Because, and I think I said this at the beginning, this movie feels part and parcel, just like the other movies in this franchise. Crooked cops, crooked precinct, a killer that we don't know who is there. They're
Right.
torturing people in great ways and awesome gore. All of that is stock Saw. We're missing
Hmm.
Tobin, okay, and we have Chris. So for all the people, I guess, out there that didn't like this movie, it has to be Chris Rock because this feels like a Saw movie.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And Coriander, let's go back a little bit too. Let's talk about the traps and a little bit of the story as well, because it opens up, just like the other movies usually do, with the traps. And I thought the first one was that was pretty rough. What did you think of that
Yeah.
first trap that we saw in the um, with the train and everything?
Yeah, I I always enjoy the traps in these movies, and I just like how you don't really get anything that's like duplicated. They've thought up of
Right.
so many different ways to like torture you. And
Hmm.
yeah, if you ask me, this is like one of the easiest ones. Rip out your tongue or, versus what some other people had to do to themselves. So
Hmm.
yeah, this was a great beginning to the movie, definitely. And for the first trap, it was good.
Yeah, I
It was
agree. And
messy.
it
Yeah,
was, man. And of course,
yeah.
that's when we first see, Chris Rock playing Zeke. He's on the case. He has that big meeting with his boss, the captain, Angie, who, and I gotta admit, man, she didn't play around. I know we talked about this and last time we had talked about this kill, but Marissa Nichols, who played Angie, Captain Angie, she was badass, man. But we found out that she had a lot of ties to Zeke's father, and had been on the force for a while and stuff like that. And she assigns the rookie, to come in and work with Zeke, played by Max Minghella as William Shank. And so, right from the beginning, you're kind of just following these guys, and it reminded me a lot of movies like Seven, The Bone Collector, which I absolutely love those movies. Kill, what did you think about, as we started to meet these cast of characters and how that worked for the story, or didn't work for the story, in your opinion?
I thought it did work because you have a more grizzled senior detective uh
Hmm.
going through a divorce. He's seen some stuff.
Right.
He's
Hmm.
he knows the streets.
Hmm.
And then you have kind of a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed younger detective, newly married, etc. It feels a lot like Seven, just on those
Hmm.
details alone.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and the chemistry was there between these two characters because you had one
Yes.
character that's trying to kind of fit in and get in with his partner, and then you have the other one that's kind of pushing him away, but as the story progresses, starts to warm up
Hmm.
to him.
Right.
And even kind of mourn him later on in a way. So
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Hmm.
Absolutely. And real quick, and I'll get to you in a second, Coriander, because I wanted to talk about something else that was actually kind of important to me as well. Now, Val was taking a look at the poll. I put in the poll in the live chat whether people think this is Spiral a good movie or not. 20 votes. We got 60% saying yes, 25% saying no, and in between we got 15. All right. Okay. Now, Coriander, for you, and this was something I also thought was a strength of this movie, because in the beginning we saw that trap in the subway or whatever, and we come to find out it was a really close friend of Zeke's, and they have to go to the funeral, and he wants to console his friend's wife and so forth. First of all, what did you think of those scenes? And to me, I thought they were pretty pivotal. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, he really cared about this. Were they partners or just friends?
Yeah, they were partners.
Okay, and only like the only guy in that department you know, who I guess you could say liked him. So, I mean, I thought that yeah, he was great. He did good in this role. Well, this part. Um, I thought that he showed emotion and he's trying to comfort her, and he was, when he, said that he had to ask her questions, it's not like a typical cop, he
Right.
was like, sorry, but I gotta, I hate to do this, but so I thought that, he was good at this role. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought
I
he was
keep
very
saying that for
effective.
this part. Mm.
But I thought he was really he was believable in that kill. Don't you think? I mean, I thought it was one of those things where I really, because this was still early in the film, but I think when we went to this scene and him dealing with the death of his friend, that's kind of when I was totally on board with Chris Rock in this character.
yeah. I mean, you definitely feel the emotion of the loss of his ex-partner and friend,
Right.
because he
Hmm.
didn't have a lot of them in this
Right.
precinct.
Hmm.
But I feel like Chris did a good job. I mean,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And real quick too, in the chat, Kale was saying, I also liked the new puppet and voice, but nowhere near as iconic as Billy and Tobin Bell's voice. Yeah, I agree. Um, Ginger Ninja saying, keeping a bit of mystery in the film invests you more in it. It keeps you watching. Yeah, and that was something that, like you were saying earlier, Killian. In some of the middle movies, we knew who the killer was, we knew what was going on, and so it took that aspect away. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Um, Dominic saying the original was a mystery, much like Spiral. I agree. Chris Rock was good at playing a serious role. I agree with that too. I think, and I
Hmm.
was surprised. I really did not think that was going to happen. And what's up? We got Fate Decided's in the chat. What's going on, man? Good to see you. Good to see you. Um, Blecka saying this movie was fun times, just some things that felt awkward. Okay, interesting. Um, but and also Omni just jumped into the chat too. What's going on? Good to see you. Good to see you.
Hey.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think, and let's see, Fate was saying Spiral is better than it gets credit for, but fell flat on occasions. The twist I felt was predictable. Would have liked a bit more, but it was a solid film. All right, yeah. Um, but yeah, and I wanted to get to that too as we start to round this out. When we talk about the ending, these movies are, they're very popular as far as what the endings reveal, the twist, and so forth and so forth. Kill, I'll start with you. What did you think about the ending, the reveal, and the ending of this movie?
Well, like I said a little earlier, the reveal and I guess the motives for the killer,
Hmm.
you know, make a lot of sense.
Yeah,
For someone to go through that type of loss, and
yeah,
now I will say this, and the killer even addresses it himself, saying, do you know how much of this I had to plot and plan, and went through the
right,
precinct and hope to get positioned right here. That is a lot of stuff. But then again, in the Saw world, is it? Because John
right.
has built damn transformers, all right,
Right.
And plotted, oh, I'm gonna get you to do this, and
Right.
I knew you were gonna try to kill me, and that therefore you killed yourself. So it's always a lot of
Exactly.
plans and so forth, future
Right.
proofing
Yeah.
things. So I didn't have an issue with the motive. They even kind of had kind of their own take on classic scenes from past Saw movies. Like you got the person that's hanging like on an apparatus, and if the cops come through the door, that
Well,
person's probably gonna die. Talking about
well, to
Samuel Jackson.
yeah, well, to me,
Yeah.
that was kind of the big thing to me, because like for instance, in the first movie, the twist was that the killer was right there in the bathroom with them, and it was John Kramer himself. To me, the reveal, although I didn't think that the reveal was a strong point of the movie, but I do think the ending with Samuel L. Jackson was, because Chris Rock had to make a choice whether he stops Shank from escaping or shoot the target to free his father and save him, right? And it was a pretty cool scene how it played out with the tension. And he chooses to let Shank go. But the twist of it, I guess, was the fact that Shank knew that the cops were going to come through the door, and he had that second rig on the trap, and Samuel Jackson got shot by the cops, which was horrendous, and I thought that was pretty powerful. So it was almost like it wasn't like a traditional twist for the Saw movies. It was kind of a different type of twist, which I thought was cool. Like, that's hard to, this is the ninth movie in the franchise. So I really appreciated the fact that they kind of changed it up. You're expecting something, along the lines of these other reveals we've seen in all these other movies, but instead they give you something that's a lot different, because I really thought he saved his father in that moment. You know what I mean? And then, of course, Shank gets away. That's the other thing too. It's a cliffhanger. He's like, shh, and he gets away, and you see Chris Rock yelling. Corey, I thought it was really a powerful ending. Corey, what did you think of the ending as we start to wind up here?
Yeah, I mean, you said it. I thought when he shot that target that his father was saved and all was going to be good, but
Mm-hmm.
no, yeah, that was great. And yeah, that ending, I really hope at some point they like make an 11th movie and do a continuation to this one, because
Yeah.
I'm curious as to what's going to happen, So
Right.
I hate those movies that didn't Terminate? No. I can't remember what movie, but anyway, I'm not even gonna go there. So anyway,
Okay.
continue on.
Well, Kale was saying the ending was cool, but very predictable. I have to say, I would like to see the story spiral setup continue, but who knows? Maybe Saw 10 will have a post-credit scene for it. Well, here's the thing: the movie, it did well. It did well enough. It didn't do big numbers, but it did well enough as far as what they had for the budget and so forth. So Chris Rock, even recently, Chris Rock has said he's open to continuing the story, and he's basically saying, hey, it's a possibility, there's always a
That's
chance, and so
cool.
forth and so forth. So it could be the type of thing where you have Saw 10 that comes out, and if it does have a story from the past, and then they do a movie where it's the sequel to Spiral, and then it's in the future, it's a forward progressing. So I think that could actually be pretty cool for the franchise in general, because obviously if they continue this story, Shank is on the run, and you've got Zeke, who's obviously gonna go after him. But Darren Boosman and those guys, the filmmakers, had said they've got ideas that go much bigger than just police corruption and so forth. So it could be some really cool things that they decide to do if they move forward. You know what I mean? And I actually would be all up for. I'd be for it, man. What about you, Gil?
Yeah. I mean, I would love to know, you know, where this story goes. And one other
Mm-hmm.
thing I was going to add is, we've seen it so many times. Whether it's Hoffman or John, that final scene where he's like, game over, and slides the metal door. This, they didn't really have a metal door, but they had those big elevator metal doors, and he's like, oh,
Right.
peace out. And he
Yep.
shuts the door. And it's like, oh, okay, I see what you did
Yes.
there. I see
That's a
what you
good
did there.
point too. I didn't even really think of it like that, but you're right, man. That's
Yeah.
I
And
like
and,
that.
and and the one thing, I mean, these guys obviously they're fans. They're
Yes,
fans
I
of
was
the
gonna
Saw
say
franchise.
that.
Chris Rock, whether you
Yeah,
hate him in this or not, he helped get this made. And we haven't
yeah.
had Saw in a while. He's a fan. Like,
Well,
embrace it.
and the thing of it is, he approached, the guys at Lionsgate with his own ideas of extending the franchise and so forth and so forth. They became interested in the concept, and he wanted to honor the legacy of the franchise, but still reinvigorating it and going in a new direction. I think this story did it. I put it this way: I think this story did it much better than Jigsaw, like miles ahead. And I think it was really interesting. But like you said, at the end, when those doors close, they had moments like that that were kind of little winks and nods to the franchise. So, anyways, I think it was some good stuff. I really do. I think this movie definitely does not get the credit it deserves. It was a fun film. It really was. So, anyways, that's about all we've got for our discussion for Spiral, and some of the reasons why we think it's a lot better than people might think. Maybe giving it another watch and see what they think. And as we leave here, Dominic was saying the ending was foreshadowed when the small puppet raises a miniature gun earlier. Yes, that's true. Yeah, that was wow. It was a crazy ending, man. I really thought I thought he was gonna save his father. But anyways,
Mhm.
guys, for you guys in the chat, thanks for hanging out with us. We appreciate it. Definitely give the video a like. It would help support us. We'd appreciate it. But let us know in the comment section down below what you thought of the movie and some of the high points or the low points. We didn't get a chance to, um, um, recognize each comment, but definitely let us know in the comment section. And we're planning to rank the franchise, so that should be really interesting. We'll be hoping to do that next Friday, same time at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So hopefully you guys can join us then. We will catch you guys later. If you're watching this, if you're listening to this, you are the Night Watch. Peace out.
Peace.
Ch-ch.